Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for watching my presentation. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Rahmila. I'm an English teacher from Indonesia and currently I'm doing my PhD at Swinburne University of Technology, Australia. Today I'll be talking about poetic transcription in narrative data analysis, a study of EFL teachers in Indonesia. My research is not finished yet. It is still at the stage of data analysis. So in this presentation, I'm not going to explain the final result or the whole project, but I'm just going to share about the methodology that I use in my research. This presentation might be of interest for those who are doing research or want to learn more about different types of research methodology. To start with, here is a little bit information about my research project. The overall research question is, what are the lived experiences of EFL beginning teachers in Indonesia that impact the construction of their teacher identity? The methodology that I use is narrative inquiry, and to collect data, I conducted in-depth interviews with the participants. There are 15 participants in my research. All of them are EFL beginning teachers in one region of Indonesia. The interviews were already conducted last year, and the interviews were transcribed verbatim. Because I have 15 participants, I end up with a big file of interview transcript and I was quite overwhelmed with my data. Um, and in narrative inquiry, actually there are different ways to analyze data. After reading some literature, I came across journal article that discuss how to present the data with poems. I became interested, and after some discussion with my supervisors, I decided to adopt this method for my data analysis and presentation. Well, to be honest, I'm still new in this type of methodology, so my knowledge is still very limited, but let me try to explain what I know about poetic inquiry. Poetic inquiry is a form of qualitative approach. It is originated from art-based research. It can be used as a tool and method for presentation of research data. And poetic inquiry is often used as the umbrella term for the diversity of poetic forms. If we come across literature, there are multiple terms used to refer to poetic inquiry, such as research poetry, or data poems, poetic representation, poetic transcription, poetic condensation, found poetry or found poems, narrative poetry, ethnopoems, autobiographical poems, and many others. Despite the differences, basically, to my understanding, poetic inquiry is actually about transforming research texts such as field notes or interview transcript or reflective journal into poems. Some researchers use poems all the way throughout the research process. So they create poem before the analysis, during the analysis, or after analysis. In my study, I use poem during analysis and also presented in my thesis. In creating poems, there are three types. First, researcher voice poems. Second, participant voice. And third, literature voice. Researcher voice poems come from researchers' observation or field notes or reflection. Commonly, it is for ethnography or autoethnography research. Participant voice poems are created from interview transcripts, or it can be written by the participant themselves. Sometimes, a researcher can also co-author with the participant and create poems together. The last one, literature voice. This is the less common or less popular one because in creating poem, we need to use literature or theory as the source. In my study, I'm doing participant voice where I transform the interview transcript into poetic forms. Now, why using poem in research? Probably most of us wonder because we know that poem is a form of creative writing, whereas research paper have the convention of academic writing style, so they seem in contrast. But actually, researchers acknowledge the use of poem, and poem can be integrated into our dissertation or our journal article, and it is acknowledged as a form of creative research method. So the function of poem in research is first for data analysis. So especially for qualitative data analysis, poem help to reduce the data. So it helps the process of data reduction. Commonly in data reduction process, interview transcript or field notes are broken down or shortened into components depending on certain themes that the participant intend to seek. But in poetic inquiry, uh, we recreate the transcript into poetic forms, uh, and we utilize participant words in a condensed or concise form. Next, poems bring us closer to the narrator perspective because actually the poems represent the voice or the experiences of the person. Then poems have the element of emotional intensity. People who read poems will experience different effect compared to reading a plain interview excerpts. And poem will produce different effect to the reader because readers are also allowed to have their own impression and interpretation. Now, these are the steps of what I did in creating poems from the interview transcripts. So, first of all, I need to code the data. This is a common stage in qualitative data analysis. So, to code the data, we look for a recurring pattern that answer our research question. So, in this case, I coded my interview transcript based on my research question that want to know the construction of the teacher identity based on their experience as beginning teacher. Next, I created a table of two columns. The function of this column is to put the interview transcript and later to create the poems. So the next stage, I select extract from interview transcript and copy paste them into the left column. I'm going to show you in a minute the example. After I select the extract and put into the left column, I highlighted the keywords or phrases, and these keywords or phrases are copy and paste into the right column. So now on the right columns, I have a list of words and phrases, which later I will have to arrange into poems. So in the next stage, I have to group this line into stanza and arrange the stanza into a meaningful sequence. Okay, in the next slide, I'm going to show you the example of what I did. Okay, here we go. This is one example of how I transform the interview transcript into a poem. As I have explained before, I selected some parts of the interviews and copy it into the left column. So here, the theme of this part of the interview is about first time teaching. So the participant told her story when she became teacher for the first time during teaching practicum as a student teacher. Here I highlighted the striking words or phrases that fit my purpose because I want to know what her experience was like at the beginning. So I took the words teaching practicum. I taught at a high school. I was really confused We had knowledge from campus, but implementing it was not easy. Do you like English? No, they said. We don't like it. So this part is the conversation between her and her students. And then how she felt about her first time teaching. I didn't have the ability to control the students. The class was very, very noisy, really noisy. Everyone was talking. So I just simply copy and paste into the right column. And this is the continuation of the previous story, because in one slide is not enough, so I have to divide into two slides. The other statement that I took from the interview are, I really didn't know what to do. Getting the students' attention was difficult. It was really hard. I felt upset. They didn't pay attention. The factor might be from myself. I should have been able to control it. I didn't have any experience. I was still awkward. It was awkward. So as you can see here, the poetic transcript basically is taking and selecting certain words or phrases from the verbatim transcript and put it into a list of lines. And as we look at the poetic transcription, this line actually not in good sequence yet. So we need to rearrange this line into a meaningful sequence and group them into a stanza so it becomes a good poem. Here is the refined version after I try several times to arrange or rearrange the line and stanza. So I group the lines that make a stanza, and then I rearrange the stanza into a good order. Let me read the poem. I taught at a high school. It was not easy. We had knowledge from campus, but implementing it was not easy. The class was very noisy. Everyone was talking, really noisy. I really didn't know what to do. I didn't have the ability to control the students. I was really confused. I asked the students, "Do you like English?" "No," they said. "We don't like it." It was awkward. They didn't pay attention. The factor might be from myself. I should have been able to control it, but I didn't have any experience. Getting the students' attention was difficult. It was really hard. I felt upset. So here, if you notice, the participant original word or expression were not changed. I only rearranged them so they have a meaningful sequence of what has been experienced or felt by the participant. So we need to arrange several times, grouping and then regrouping the lines until we found the most logical order. Here, my purpose is to show the feeling of the participant, and we learn from this poem that teaching for the first time as a student teacher was quite challenging, and there was an emotional experience here because she could not control her student. She didn't know what to do because she was like still a new teacher, and so she could feel how she taught for the first time. Now this is from another participant, but the theme is about her experience teaching during pandemic. So I took the words, I remember it very well. Online teaching began. I didn't take the word learning because I want to focus on the teacher experience. So I intentionally leave that out. And then because I want to focus on her feeling, I took the word I was shocked. How to do online teaching. And then in the past, when studying at the university, we were never taught the strategies. because of the coronavirus, I got confused. The first time I gave materials, it was monotonous. I asked them to answer the questions. I was still confused. How I should teach? It was monotonous. So again, this list of lines maybe are not in a good order yet, or not in a good group of stanza. So we need to arrange again into a good order. But sometimes if we think that the participant story are already in good order, we don't need to rearrange the line. Maybe we only need to group them into stanza. And this one, the refined version, after I rearrange and regroup into stanza. Let me read the poem. I remember it very well. Online teaching began because of the coronavirus. I was shocked how to do online teaching. I got confused. In the past, when studying at university, we were never taught the strategies. The first time I gave materials, it was monotonous. I asked them to answer the questions. It was monotonous. I was still confused. How should I teach? So from this point, we learn how this participant struggled when she transitioned into online teaching. We learned that she felt shocked because she never learned before in university how to teach online. So we could feel her experience. And then okay, this one is another example of poem from an interview transcript. The theme is also about teaching during pandemic. So I took the participant words, online class is not effective. I'm unable to express. So I leave out the word also from the verbatim transcript, but I add the word myself. So in creating poetic transcription, sometimes we can add a necessary word if we think that it could make the word more meaningful. And we can also leave out the words that we think is not necessary. So all the decision depend on us as a researcher and the writer of the poem. And then the next word, it feels like it's not me. I used to like asking the student to come in front of the class to make them active in class. Now it becomes passive. So originally he said now it becomes passive, but I change it into I become passive. So I want to focus on his feeling. Not fun anymore. I become passive in teaching. So in the next sentence, he said I become passive. So I decided to use this word instead of it. So in verbatim transcript, it is common that participant said things like repeatedly or said words that are incomplete sentence, or maybe not a well structured sentence. So as a researcher or writer, we are allowed to uh, rephrase that as long as it doesn't change the intention or the story told by the participant. And the continuation of the previous transcript, I have difficulty in developing material. I add the word the here because I'm used to. So he repeat the word used to, but I decided only to take once. So it becomes because I'm used to teaching directly. Unable to express myself, I become so flat. Want to do some fun but can't. Want to play game but what? So here the sentence doesn't have a subject, but later on when I construct the poem, I decided to make it into a complete sentence by adding the word I. And then here I leave the explanation about what kind of game he wanted to use, so I just want to focus on his feeling. So I took the words I'm bored, so bored teaching online. And here is the refined version from the previous interview transcript. Let me read the point. Online class is not effective. I'm unable to express myself. It feels like it's not me. I used to like asking the students to come in front of the class to make them active in class. Now I become passive. Not fun anymore. I have difficulty in developing the material because I'm used to teaching directly. I become passive in teaching. I'm unable to express myself. I become so flat. I want to do some fun, but can't. I want to play games, but what? I'm bored, so bored. I'm so bored teaching online. So from this refined version, then we can learn how he feels as a beginning teacher when he transitioned into online teaching or emergency remote teaching. So if I relate with my research question about teacher identity, there is a change the way the teacher feel about himself as the impact of online teaching. Finally, I come to the conclusion. First, poetic inquiry could generate a better understanding of the phenomena being studied. So in my case, I want to understand the experiences of EFL beginning teachers and how those experiences impact their teacher identity. Second, creating poetic transcription help to bring a researcher closest to the participant experience. Actually, it is a different way of immersing with the research data. And third, through poetic transcription, the voices and emotional dimension of participant experiences could be strongly represented. Finally, I suggest that poetic transcription strategy be adopted by researchers who wish to look at their data from a new perspective. Here are some references if you are interested in learning more about poetic inquiry. I hope they are useful. And thank you for listening to my presentation. I'd be glad to answer any question.